So what should be done to strengthen the union? Well, it should be the sort of things that we've been talking about for a while, and let's just recap them. And one of the things that should be done is that we should overturn the idea that everything is devolved by default unless it is specifically written down as reserved. Okay? What Brown wants to do is he wants to institutionalize that particular settlement where everything is devolved by default. That is to say, things that we know about, things that we don't know about yet, things that we've forgotten about, things that might be incoming in the future. Everything's to be considered to be devolved unless it's specifically reserved. Well, it should be the other way around. Everything should be considered by default to be reserved unless it's written down to be devolved. And we laid that out in our magazine, Do More Together, when we talked about the devolution settlement. It was one of the very, very first things that we said when we said, get the devolution settlement the right way round. Another thing that should be done is to ensure that the civil service can't be used to break up the United Kingdom. British taxpayers should not be paying money to the civil service to destroy the very country itself. Now that's a completely different matter from the civil service being allowed to simply carry out government policy. That's fine. But if government policy or the policies of the administration is to actually destroy the UK, then the British taxpayers should not be paying for that. So civil servants should not be allowed to do that. And that requires a law to be written. You can't just ask the Scottish branch of the British Civil Service to do that. There has to be a law that stops them from doing that. And hello, yes, of course, we wrote that law. We explained it all here. We even wrote it basically in legalese, a law to stop the civil service pushing the indie agenda. Now that should have been brought in the first week of Boris Johnson's premiership in 2019. It should have been brought in actually way back. It should have been brought in prior to the devolution actually going through in 1999. But nothing's been done, and the situation has just been allowed to go on and on. Indeed, the civil service needs to be reformed completely. We spoke about that last week, and I noticed in the newspapers today it was saying that some union leaders are suggesting that members of the Home Office and the Border Force will go on strike because they don't like the immigration law that the Tories are promoting. Well, members of the Border Force should not even be allowed to go on strike. I mean, Border Force is it's not a militarized arm, but it is a line of defense for the United Kingdom. And in that sense, anybody in that line of defense for the United Kingdom should not be allowed to go on strike. So all of that needs to be sorted as well. So think of the kind of leaders that we're really needing to bring in what has to be done. Are they out there? Well, let's hope so. And let's hope that they can get ideas from exactly the sort of things that we're saying. Another simple thing as well is simply to raise the profile of Britishness in the average household. And one of the ways you do that is when the British government writes to people, then it should brand the materials so that people know it's coming from the United Kingdom. This was brought back to my attention today when somebody sent me a copy of this thing from HM Revenue and Customs. Now, back at the end of the year, everybody who was entitled in Britain, which was millions of people, received this letter. The cost of living payments for eligible households. And what that meant is that basically the UK government was going to be given hundreds of pounds to your household to help with the cost of living and to help with the cost of gas and electricity. But if you read this, it doesn't mention once the UK government. It doesn't mention once the British government. It doesn't mention once the UK Treasury or the British Treasury or anything. And so a lot of people in Scotland would get this And not everybody knows what HMRC means, or even what HM Revenue and Customs is. And some people might even think it's a branch of the Scottish administration. So, what this needs to be like, there needs to be a Union Jack in here. This needs to be coloured. There needs to be branding that tells you very clearly the UK government is going to send you X amount of money between these months. And so people say, oh, well, maybe the UK government's good for something. Okay? Very simple branding. And we've been on this. We've been on this since furlough, when people were getting thousands of pounds from the UK government. But when they did a study, they found out that many people in Scotland didn't even know it was the UK government. They thought it was from Holyrood. Brand the furlough scheme British. Another policy that we wrote about back in autumn 2021. 18 months have gone by and still they're not branding their money, the offers that they make to people. They're still not branding it as British. So people don't know where that money's coming from, because not everybody's as switched on as we are, So that's another thing. Brand UK payments clearly. And just other things like that suggest that you've got to get your act in order. Somebody sent us this cutting. Westminster could fall before it is repaired. This is from the Daily Telegraph of the 17th of May. There is a real and rising risk that the Houses of Parliament will be destroyed by a catastrophic event before they are repaired, MPs warned last night. Parliament's Public Accounts Committee said the thousands who worked in the Palace of Westminster were at risk from leaks, fire and falling masonry. They said it was, quote, incredible that no decisions had been made about how it should be restored 5 years after MPs agreed to take action. 5 years come and gone and nothing's been done, and the problem has just been allowed to fester. And I thought that's almost like a very good metaphor for the style of British government that we have had in the last 10 years. Just kind of sweep it under the carpet, as it were. But something like Westminster, we've always said as well, move it out for a few years, move it around the country for a few years, bring it closer to various big cities. All these sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of interesting ideas that can be done there as well. So the British government really has to stop getting the easy things wrong. And those are some of the suggestions that we would make, that Gordon Brown should be making, and that we will be lobbying the Labour government, if it comes in, to make, instead of going down this fruitless route and absurd route of basically nationalising, making the second chamber a nationalistic chamber in London. Nobody's demanding that. Nobody's asking for that. There's no demographic that's going to be appeased by that. It's just a crazy idea, and it will do Labour no favours. And at the moment, as we've said, the House of Lords doesn't even have any SNP members in it, whereas Brown is proposing a second chamber that will be full of them. I don't understand his political thinking at all. Unless, well, I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to move Britain to a federal state. I think that's his end goal.